Okay, real quick in the hangar update on a recent crash. We've had a lot of incidents happening out there that I can't possibly keep up with. A lot of requests for information on incidents. Uh, One incident I want to cover that happened back on 2 January is the Embraer Phenom 300 out of Provo, Utah. We now have some second and third hand information that we can share with you that might shed a little bit of light as to what happened. First, starting with the Aviation Safety Network here. Embraer EMB 505 Phenom 300, operator EagleJet 300E LCC, registration November 555, November Romeo. One fatality, a total of 4 occupants on board. An Embraer 505 Phenom 300 was destroyed when it crashed on takeoff from runway 13 at Provo Municipal Airport, Provo, Utah. One of the pilots sustained fatal injuries. The second pilot was seriously injured, and 2 passengers received minor injuries. I'm not sure if the second pilot was checked out in the Phenom. METAR weather reports for 1756 UTC or 1056 local time show the weather as wind variable at 6 knots, visibility 3 miles in light snow and mist, overcast at 1,000 feet, temperature dew point -1 and -02, altimeter 2979er. And the pictures here do show a snowy condition on the day of the accident. So the word on the streets, second and third hand information, and this needs to be verified by investigators, is that this pilot pulled this Phenom jet out of a heated hangar, taxied out, and departed. On his taxi out to the runway and on his departure, he did what's called a rolling takeoff, where you roll onto the runway, continue rolling, add power, and then start your departure. During his takeoff roll, he began to lose directional control. The aircraft departed off to the side of the runway, where the pilot attempted to lift the aircraft off of the ground before V1 rotate speed at too slow of an airspeed, got the nose up, installed the aircraft, and subsequently crashed. So when doing a rolling takeoff on a twin-engine aircraft, and we got to verify this, I believe the Phenom 300 has an auto throttle system. On the bigger jets and on the 310, I like to roll out on the runway and do kind of a static takeoff. And I want to get the power up, especially on something like the big 777. You want to get the power up to a fairly high power setting. Make sure both engines are equal before hitting the auto throttles and moving ahead. Because if you have one engine up and the other engine still spooling up when you launch down the runway and or hit the auto throttles, that'll cause a lot of asymmetric thrust and will cause you directional problems, especially if the runway is slippery or icy. The reason the pilot wanted to do a rolling takeoff, it's assumed that it's because he wanted to get out of the icing conditions quickly. Once you get the aircraft out of a heated hangar, you do not want additional contamination on top of the wings to accumulate before you blast off. You want to get going and get safely airborne and get your anti-ice and de-ice equipment on and climb out through the weather before any snow is allowed to accumulate on the wings. But before you blast off, you've got to get those throttles equalized, and this is something investigators will have to look at if they got that data. Was there a problem on the initial takeoff that started the issue with directional control of the aircraft? Another issue investigators have got to look at is what was the actual runway conditions versus the recorded runway or reported runway conditions. RCR, runway condition reading. How slippery is the runway? Is rated good, poor, nil. As ice and snow accumulates on the runway, pilots need to know what these different runway condition readings are to give them a heads up as to the performance of the aircraft, especially for landing and for determining landing distance. Your whole landing distance is predicated on the RCR reading of the runway. For this takeoff, if this pilot had some more information about the runway condition reading, may have helped influence his technique that he used for the takeoff departure. We just don't know. Investigators are going to have to check that out. So loss of control on takeoff, premature rotation, stalling the aircraft, and crashing. So a lot of questions for investigators to look at. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. There's some additional content over there on Patreon regarding some recent subjects we've been talking about. Check it out. See you here. Back to work.